We're joined today by Robia Scott, dancer, actor, life coach. You might remember her as Pearl from the duo Diamond and Pearl from Prince and the New Power Generation. Robia, how you doing today?
Hey, Justin. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Glad to be here.
Well, first of all, can you tell the listeners a bit about what you're up to these days? I know you work as a life coach and how all that came about.
Well, what I'm up to nowadays is I am coaching. I wrote a book called Counterfeit Comforts, and it's those things we turn to for comfort, like food, alcohol, shopping, cigarettes, all of those types of things, which, many of them are not inherently bad choices, but when we turn to them for comfort, then we can become addicted and we have patterns and those things wind up controlling us. So I help people break the addiction to the counterfeit comfort and be able to put things back into balance in their life, especially in the area of food. That's kind of my area of expertise.
Yeah, and you mentioned you have a book, Counterfeit Comforts, and the idea of that, obviously everybody has something, whether it's a vice or, something that maybe goes a little further than that, and that's where you can step in and kind of help people get back on track.
Yeah, that's it. I found that counterfeit comforts are universal. We all have a little something. For women, I found primarily food seems to be kind of the number one. But then, women, it runs the gamut. I have women that have gambling counterfeits and all sorts of things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And then for men, it can also be food. It can be work. It seems to be a big one for men and getting kind of their value through their achievements. Again, all good things. I mean, we want to be excellent. We want to excel in life. But when we're so driven that it becomes compulsive, we're just not quite in balance, not in peace. You know what I mean? Definitely.
Well, how can the listeners get in touch with you if maybe they could use some coaching in their own lives?
Well, you can find me on my website, which is simply my name, robiascott.com. And actually on there, I have a little free gift. I have a download that you can get on there, which talks a little bit more about how to conquer the counterfeit comfort of food, primarily. So that will kind of put you in touch with me, get you in my newsletter, and then we can go from there.
Awesome. Well, Robia, I wanted to ask you a bit about, before your life as a coach, back in the early days of your career, of course, I know you were a dancer and you worked with all sorts of people from a pretty young age. I know the Shake Your Love video with Debbie Gibson, a lot of other music videos. Right. And I mean, you were really busy from back from when you were a child.
I was. I had a busy childhood. I actually saw the movie Flashdance back in the day. Are you in the age range to know Flashdance?
I am. Yep.
Okay. So I saw Flashdance when I was a youngin', and I thought, oh my gosh, that's for me. Like, I'm going to do this as a career. And I started taking dance classes, and I was living in Los Angeles at the time, so that worked out. Got a dance agent at 16 and started going on auditions for music videos because at that time MTV was really the rage. It was like on the upswing and there were tons of music videos going on. And my very first job at 16 years old was Debbie Gibson, Shake Your Love. And then it just went on to, many, many videos for and every artist you can possibly think of until one day I got a call to audition for Prince. Which I did. I wound up getting that job for the Cream video, which was on his hit album, kind of his big comeback album in the early 90s called Diamonds and Pearls. And I wound up playing the Pearl half of Diamonds and Pearls. He had me and another girl. We looked a lot alike. He sort of dubbed us as his twins, even though we weren't related. And we wound up being the muses for the album. So one music video turned into all the music videos, the album cover, a world tour, and a pretty incredible experience when you're 21 years old on stage with Prince.
Yeah, that time period and that album really was kind of like a comeback for Prince in a way, getting back onto the top of the charts. And, as you mentioned, you were on the cover with the holographic picture and the music videos. That must have been crazy for you to kind of be like the face of that whole thing.
It was crazy. Also because that was during the time of his self-imposed silence. So he wasn't doing any interviews, any press. So I was really, the other gal, Diamond, and I were doing it all. So we were on every talk show, tons of radio, interviews. and then being on stage with him and dancing in front of, 30, 40, 50,000 people at a time around the world with Prince. So it was an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that a bit, your memories of that tour. And, like most Prince shows, the amount of detail and the complexity and, and everything on stage, that had to have been another level for a dancer, I imagine.
Well, interestingly enough, I had never even gone to a concert at that point in my life. So I'd never even seen a concert when I wound up doing the Prince concert. So I did not realize just how above and beyond Prince is as a performer and all the things that were happening on stage. After I got home from the tour and I went and saw a concert and there's, someone just standing there with a microphone singing, I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize what I was a part of while I was doing it. But yes, it was very intricate. We had the whole band and the musicians and the, everything that was going on. We were like on a bed that was dangling from the sky that went out over the audience and, hundreds of feet in the air. It was, it was quite extraordinary.
That's really getting thrown into the deep end, I guess you could say.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I've heard the song 51 Hours, and I've read things about, Prince wanting to release more music for you and L'Oreal as Diamond and Pearl. Can you share any insight or memories of that? Was that going to be kind of like the next step for your career?
I never had any intentions of being a singer. I actually transitioned after I came off tour with Prince. I transitioned into acting, and I did a whole bunch of acting jobs, which we can chat about momentarily. But, with Prince, he was very impromptu. You never really knew what was going to happen. You'd get a call at 10 in the morning and you'd be on a plane 2 hours later going somewhere to shoot something. I mean, it was really just, off the cuff. So I think we were on tour at that time and, we got a phone call that there was a song. And then before we know it, we get a knock on the door at the hotel room and there's, lyrics and we're learning this song. And then we're in a studio doing it. So, it just really came out of nowhere. Lori did have a little bit more of a desire to do that. So she was a little bit more featured. And then, with Prince, you just don't know. Like, he might go that direction and you might kind of record more things or you might not. So I think, we did that song. We didn't know what to expect. That was kind of it. And then we were on to the next thing.
So I imagine you must have always had a sense that things could change at any moment. Prince was a guy who was always kind of known for blowing things up, as you mentioned, taking different directions. And, you were there when he changed his name and went through all that. That was probably the most uncertain time of his career.
That was pretty interesting because at one point, literally overnight, you just couldn't even address him as Prince anymore. And so if he was across the room, I would say to him, well, what do I say? Like, hey, you? It doesn't really seem appropriate. But that was Prince. He had an idea. He was having issues with the record label, and it was all that kind of thing. That's why he did that with his name to deal with his contract, and then I think owning his music, all of that. And then he just decided to change it. So, like you said, with Prince, everything was you just had to be on your toes. Everything changed in an instant, and you had to go with the flow.
Well, I know the Diamonds and Pearls Big Deluxe set just came out within the past year here. What did you think of that? Did you have a chance to look through any of that stuff?
It actually just came out just a few months ago. And it's been 30 some years. I have not had a chance to dive too deeply into it. I did listen to some of the tracks, like the Cream track, the different versions. I did have the opportunity way back when, many years ago, to go into the vault. Prince led me in there and gave me a little firsthand experience of, seeing all the walls and walls just lined with tracks with every artist you can possibly think of with their names, just across the board from rappers to R&B to country. So he had recorded songs with basically everyone. So to see now, all these decades later, them dipping into the vault and starting to pull some things out is pretty exciting. And just to know the Diamonds and Pearls, like to hear all these other versions of the songs are pretty cool too. Like the Cream take is just so different. It's so much edgier and it's just a very different take than the pop version that we have on the Diamonds and Pearls album.
Yeah, I think some people maybe forget that Paisley Park was actual running studio for not just Prince's work, but I mean, so many other artists were going through there at that time making music. I mean, you were in the thick of things there with all that stuff going on. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a home away from home. I spent a lot of time at Paisley Park, a lot of time flying from LA to Minneapolis, and running around in Prince's yellow BMW and just doing the whole thing. It was a blast.
It is funny to think back on that time. Everybody was kind of up in arms, and everyone was offended by all this racy stuff that was coming out around that time. And as a devout Christian yourself now, I'm sure looking back, you can kind of see that stuff was really, I think, kind of tame compared to things that are out nowadays.
It's so funny that you said that, because I was just, when all this was happening in these last few months with the Prince resurgence and the box set being released, I went back through some of my videos, haven't watched them in a while. My husband was watching them with me. Of course, he had seen them before, but we were watching the Get Off video. And at that time, I mean, people were they could not believe that it was so crazy. It was so racy. But just like you stated, if you look at it now, it is tame compared to what's on, regular primetime television nowadays. So, yeah, I mean, at the time, I wasn't too shocked by it, because as a dancer, honestly, being physical, kind of being in your sexuality, that's just part of what you do as a dancer. So, Prince was always very respectful. We never did anything that we felt uncomfortable with. And, we always had a say in what we were doing, what we were wearing. And it was a blast, to be honest with you. But yes, now times have changed. I did kind of go more deeply into my faith a number of years later. And so I don't know if I would, necessarily be in the Get Off video ripping my dress off as a Christian. But, that's where I was at the time, young girl dancer. It's just, those are the things you do,
So did you have any sense that down the road Prince himself would become much more spiritual than maybe he was around that time?
It's so interesting. I think he's always been spiritual, but he definitely went more full-blown into it. And from what I understand, he had a band member who was actually a Jehovah's Witness and had, influenced Prince quite a bit. And then Prince went, into that and then changed a lot of his music, actually. I think he went back and changed some things, took out some profanity and things like that, which is kind of interesting. And I was always hoping that later at some point we would reconnect and be able to, share some things along those lines. But unfortunately, that did not happen.
Well, you mentioned after you left the Prince camp, you went on and did quite a few acting roles, and really a lot of successful roles in acting as well. Buffy the Vampire Slayer and 90210. I mean, you really didn't waste a lot of time starting off on a brand new career.
Yeah, I did. I left dance after Prince because I really felt like that was the pinnacle and there was nowhere to go after Prince but down. So I was like, I'm going to leave on a high note. I think this is a really good way to end this. So I retired from dance as a dancer at 22 and transitioned into acting and went after it with the same fervency I did as a dancer, hours of class, just really studying, training, and started going on auditions and wound up going to Beverly Hills 90210. Booked that job, which was a blast. And then I got hired for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So it is pretty cool, I have to say, in my lifetime, in my career, to be a part of such a iconic, person in music, which is Prince, and then to be on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is also just like an iconic cult classic TV show. Being with Prince, 30 years later, for Prince, it'll be forever. I think he will always have a place in history as one of the most talented musicians to ever live, and performers. And then Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this show, again, 30 years later, people still love the show. It still has just as much, energy and the conventions and things going on around the world as it did decades ago. So it's kind of awesome to be a part of that as well. Definitely. And I know you're still doing a lot of acting today as well. I saw you have been in a few movies here just within the last couple of years. Yeah, after Buffy, again, I sort of let that was another big moment for me where I transitioned. And I had really gone strong in my faith at that time and was very passionate about being a speaker and a teacher, and all of my gifts for communication and expression that I had used for dancing and acting. I was then ready to kind of shift over into more of a ministry, speaker, author type of thing. So I did that for many years after I left Buffy. So I never intended to go back to acting. I thought, I had a great career in entertainment, and that was that. And then just through kind of a God-orchestrated series of events that make no sense, I wound up meeting the writers of the film God's Not Dead, that hit film from some years back. And they gave me a script for their new movie, and I wound up playing one of the lead roles. The movie is called Unplanned, and it was in theaters a few years ago. Now it's on Amazon. You can find it. And it's a pretty incredible movie. I was happy to be a part of that. And since then, I've done a few more TV shows and movies. So, I dabble in that. I'm not really pursuing it. I'm not going after that. My real focus right now is coaching and the work that I do there. But every so often, something kind of pops up. And when it's a fit, I do it.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else coming up for you, Robia, with, acting, coaching, or anything else we should be watching out for?
Right now, again, my main focus is coaching. So I have a number of 90-day programs that I walk people through, really based on a lot of my own experience. In my early 20s, I was living the dream. Like, I looked so successfung. In a lot of ways, I was really successful. But I was struggling. This image that I was portraying of confidence and being comfortable was not necessarily exactly what was going on internally. I was definitely struggling with those counterfeit comforts, especially with food and body image. Being a woman, most women deal with this, but then being an actress and a dancer on top of that just magnifies that issue. So that really led me to, kind of search out, like, how do I get free from this? How do I get comfortable in my skin? How do I get successful across the board, not just career-wise and financially, but successful emotionally, mentally, spiritually, like in all the ways I wanted to be successful. So it was through a lot of my own personal journey that I found these keys and these ways to get free. And so now that's my main passion, just helping other people, walking with them and helping them live their best lives and align with their purpose and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Well, again, Robia, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's great to hear your career has gone so well. I mean, so many different facets of it, and you're still out there helping people. And it's just been great speaking with you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dustin. You as well. Take care.
And again, that was Robia Scott, also known as Pearl from A Diamond and Pearl and Prince in the New Power Generation. And again, you can find out all about Robia Scott and get a copy of her book, Counterfeit Comforts, at her website, robiascott.com.